Hello everybody, you're welcome back again to the Reggae Appreciation Society. France, like every other country in Europe and the world at large, can boast of a vibrant reggae scene. The average reggae fan would credit the great Bob Marley for popularizing the genre over there, and that wouldn't be too far from the truth, as the Wailers first toured that country in 1973 to promote their album Catch a Fire. But the first indigenous incarnations of French reggae was courtesy of a super versatile, eccentric middle-aged artist in the person of the enigmatic Serge Gainsbourg. He's been described as France's answer to Malcolm McLaren, David Bowie, and Mick Jagger all rolled into one person, but just 100 times more controversial and offensive. A brilliant musician, but essentially a shock artist whose musical releases caused steady uproar in France. He was always ahead of the curve and loved to experiment with different genres since he began to do music in the late 1950s. And after 2 decades of doing French pop and jazz, he discovered reggae as it was just taking over the world in the 70s. A discovery that led him on a daring 1978 voyage to Jamaica to come face to face with the very heartbeat of that sound in the rugged streets of Kingston. He would collaborate with the island's cutting-edge studio session backing band that was led by Sly and Robbie, and also collaborated with reggae's greatest backing vocal team in the immortal I3s. The end result was a devastatingly brilliant and commercially successful album, albeit one that almost caused riots in France when it was released. A truly provocative shock artist, he even managed to provoke the ever-peaceful Bob Marley into serious anger. Now let's take a look at Serge Gainsbourg's 1978 Jamaican and reggae adventure. By 1978, the then 50-year-old Gainsbourg was one of France's most iconic figures in popular music, all thanks to his musical chops and an infinite capacity to spark outrage. Born Lucien Gainsbourg in Paris in 1928, his pianist father taught him how to play the piano while he was still very young. After a short spell in the army, he got a job teaching music and painting at a school before he started doing gigs as a piano player at bars and clubs in Paris in 1957. He would over time become quite successful in the 60s as a songwriter and an artist, and would put out several smash hit albums over the course of that decade. But he often faced criticism for his sexually explicit and provocative lyrics. By the 70s, he had made lots and lots of money, but always a consummate artist. He was now bored and began to experiment with genre-bending concept albums. So by early 1978, he was thirsty for a new challenge and was very eager to do revolutionary protest music, as he had been inspired by the punk movement with the likes of The Clash and the Sex Pistols, who were exploding in popularity. He began to work on new material for his album when something interesting would happen. 6 months later, in the summer of that year, his producer, Philippe Lerichon, was invited to a nightclub in Paris to hear a punk band do their thing and get some inspiration for Gainsbourg's album. The band he went to watch were late, so for 2 hours, the club's DJ kept spinning reggae records. At exactly 2 a.m., the producer got an epiphany. Serge's next album would be reggae. First thing in the morning, he called him up and suggested that they go down to Jamaica and make a reggae album. Serge thought it was a fantastic idea, and the producer began to pull the strings to make it happen, and Lerichon knew exactly who to call. He was acquainted with Chris Blackwell, whose Island Records label didn't just have reggae megastar Bob Marley in its ranks, but had taken Jamaican music to the world a decade earlier when his artist Millie Small scored a global smash hit in 1964 with the song My Boy Lollipop. They spoke on the phone, and Blackwell suggested a few reggae albums for them to listen to for inspiration. Blackwell also helped them to hire the incredible duo of Sly Dunbar and Robbie Shakespeare, as well as percussionists Uzziah Sticky Thompson, the legendary studio backing band The Revolutionaries, and the spectacular I3s, the backing vocalist trio for Bob Marley and the Wailers. They paid for a whole week session at the now legendary Dynamic Sound Studio in Kingston, and in September of 1978, Serge Gainsbourg and Philippe Lerichon flew to Jamaica for a musical adventure of a lifetime. Gainsbourg was a heavy smoker and drinker and quickly acquired a love for the island's herbs and Jamaican rum upon arrival. The next day, they made their way to the studio to meet up with the band, and when they got to Dynamic Sounds, Sly and Robbie weren't impressed with the pair when they saw them, as they didn't look like musicians, but rather like government office clerks, and were very frosty to the 2 Frenchmen in the beginning. To To break the ice, Serge would ask them if they knew any popular French music. Sly and Robbie would burst into laughter and began to make fun of them, saying they were Jamaican and didn't know any French sound at all. But Sly said he knew just the one song called Je t'aime moi non plus, a pop song which had naughty sounds from a woman in the background. And Serge excitedly responded that was his song. That immediately changed the mood in the studio as Sly and Robbie warmed up to them immediately. So work began on the instrumentals for the album. Serge's carefree, brilliant and witty ways won the admiration of the band as they would, over the course of 10 days, put together the 12 incredible songs that made up the incredible Ensembles, etc. album. The Revolutionaries band and the I3s were in full flow and cranked out material that is right up there with the greatest reggae recordings ever put together. Sly and Robbie as producers at first tried to polish the sound with overdubs and mixes, but Serge insisted that he wanted it pure and in its rawest form. Serge's vocals weren't singing but a kind of dub poetry in French over the beat, and the band had no idea what he was talking about on the record. And after 2 weeks of incredible chemistry, unforgettable fun in the studio, plus lots of herb and rum, all the tracks were done, and Gainsbourg and his producer flew back to Paris with the tapes. The album hit the streets in March 1979 and literally took off like a rocket in France. But the provocative naughty lyrics would, like previous Gainsbourg projects, spark outrage everywhere, only this time it almost got dangerous. The title track of Ensembles, etc., whose title was a quote from the French national anthem. When this song premiered on national television, it was met with a level of outrage which dwarfed everything that Gainsbourg had ever faced in his controversial career. The press totally annihilated the album, and even scarier, a group of retired nationalist paratroopers even sent out death threats and promised to attack the venue of any concert where it was performed. But as is always the case, controversy sells, and the album became a super smash hit, an incredible commercial as well as critical success. And when it was time to go on the road, he flew in Sly and Robbie and Revolutionaries as his tour backing band. The tour was simply a massive sellout, with all the concerts attended by the creme de la creme of French society. But in places like Strasbourg, the threats by nationalist groups were so severe that there were several bomb alerts at the hotel where Gainsbourg and his band were staying. Thank goodness, the tour ended without any violence and would end as a phenomenal success. But besides the French nationalists, Bob Marley was reportedly furious with Gainsbourg because the Frenchman had gotten the I3s, including his dear wife Rita, to sing erotic lyrics on the album without them knowing. Neither Bob or the I3s understood French and didn't know how naughty the lyrics were until it was too late. Bob felt disrespected to involve his wife in such slackness without them knowing. Controversy and outrage, combined with sheer brilliance, made Gainsbourg's foray into reggae music a huge success. It was supposed to be a one-time thing, but Serge fell in love with reggae and would start work on a second project, despite his producer's reluctance. But the record label, who were very pleased with the million copies sold on Ensembles, etc., were eager for a repeat. So in 1981, they flew in Sly and Robbie one more time to work their magic. But unlike the first album that was recorded in the gritty, natural and stimulating environment of Kingston, this one was recorded in the lovely and serene Compass Point Studios in Bahamas. This album, whose title means Bad News from the Stars, was also brilliant, but of course nowhere near the heights of Ensembles, etc. That would be Gainsbourg's last interpretation of the reggae sound. He would continue on his career, but years of hard drinking and smoking had taken its toll, and he would suffer ill health before passing away from a heart attack in 1991 at the age of 62. Though Serge Gainsbourg is not remembered as a reggae artist by many, his brief adventures with reggae in 1979 and the incredible music it produced is among the many magical and wonderful chapters in the history of the genre. So there you have it. Thank you for watching this video today. Please leave a like, subscribe, and until next time, Jah bless.